Welcome to the Delighted Customers Podcast. I am so glad you're here. We challenge conventional thinking about customer experience because I believe that improving experiences isn't just good for business, it's a powerful way to make a meaningful difference in people's lives. Each week, we feature thought-provoking conversations with industry thought leaders from a variety of backgrounds, offering unique perspectives and actionable insights. Get ready to sharpen your leadership and transform your approach to customer experience. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Delighted Customers Podcast. I am so excited for my guest today, Paula Courtney. Paula is the president of the Verde Group, a global market research consultancy specializing in helping companies improve customer retention. And Paul leads the development of new research methods for helping companies, and this is really what got my attention, helping companies quantify the financial impact of their customer experience. In many ways, this is what's perhaps amongst the most challenging things for any change leader is to try and improve the ROI of our work. So with that said, Paula, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark. I'm thrilled to be here and looking forward to our discussion.
Absolutely. And so grateful that you could come on. And wouldn't you agree that this is a tough nut for a lot of leaders?
Absolutely. And it shouldn't be, because as long as money matters, customers should matter because they're the primary source of revenue. So if companies need to protect and grow revenue, then they should worry about what customers are experiencing and how those experiences drive economic behaviors.
Before we dive into this, and I agree 100%, could you share a little bit more about what your organization does and how you differentiate from other people out there?
Thanks. Well, I'd say that our business, at a very high level, one could say we are in the business of helping organizations protect and grow revenue through voice of customer insights. And what that means is our belief is that as long as you follow the money, then you are poised for transformation and poised for, investing in the areas that matter most to your customers. And customers are an important input into where to invest because they are the primary drivers of revenue. If they stay with you, if they grow their, product share with you, if you get more customers, all of those drive revenue. So it makes sense that what they experience and how those experiences drive the behaviors that they exhibit in the market, is paramount for an organization to understand. And unfortunately, I think that most organizations fail in how they measure those experiences. And so in the end, they're unable to make those connections. And so they're left with a bunch of applause meter surveys, or what we call, how much do you love us surveys, that really aren't actionable and don't really provide input into the economic imperative of what companies need to do differently.
And Paul, another thing that I was impressed with from your organization was that you have done research on the retail segment and been published in BusinessWeek, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review. Can you share a little bit about, at a high level, some of the key findings from that research?
So a lot of this is where we get into what makes us different and what makes us unique.
Yeah.
Not only are we interested in understanding how, customer experiences affect economic outcomes for companies, but we have a particular focus. And our focus is on negative experiences. And that's because negative experiences have a disproportionate impact on customer behavior compared to positive ones. And this is really due in part to some of the psychological principles such as negativity bias, loss aversion, and social exchange theory. So our work is really based on social science. And for 30 years, we've been measuring this, and it takes, I honestly say, a lot of courage for organizations to go to market with a purposeful and deliberate interrogation of negative customer experiences. So a lot of the research that you cited and the publications that we've had was really about sharing the extent to which negative experiences occur in industry, regardless of industry and regardless of country, because we work in 35 countries, so we're pretty global. So our research is really focused on sizing up, how big is that financial risk as a result of negative experiences, which, by the way, every organization creates friction for their customers. The question is, are you able to identify noise from signal, like which experiences matter most, which negative ones are really important, versus chasing the tail of every negative problem that customers may experience. And some are innocuous and some really matter.
So I love that. I love this vantage point of looking at the friction and understanding what really matters, what doesn't, what we should focus on. But you mentioned negative bias. Could you for level set for the audience what you mean by that?
So negativity bias, which is basically a theoretical
Construct.
construct,
Yeah.
and it basically is that people weigh negative experiences more heavily than positive ones. So a single bad experience can undo the goodwill created by multiple good experiences. So it is true that customers, when they encounter friction, they are more likely to reduce spend, defect to competitors, and discourage others through negative word of mouth. So these reactions are well documented in multiple industries and in both academic and applied research.
Okay. So that makes sense. And you often hear bad news travels faster than good news. Bad word of mouth is just crushing when it comes to trying to get referrals and trying to get business from referrals. And this just kind of follows along that thought stream. So just to piggyback off the weight of this when it comes to leaders in the role of trying to make change, from my own experience as a CX leader, one of the things that I wasn't fully aware of, and I try to take personally, and maybe you could agree with me that maybe those in that seat need to reframe their thinking about the personal, I guess, attribution that we take for not doing a good job, is that we're feeling like we need to prove the ROI of customer experience. And that's kind of my point, is like we're all these baby birds chirping for the money, for the resources in the organization. So we're not alone. Marketing, product, these other departments are also in the same boat. And if you're sitting in the C-suite, you've got a scarce, limited amount of resources that you've got to distribute. And so to be fair, they're looking for, as you said earlier on, gee, what's going to give us the best bang for our buck overall, because we have a business to run, right? Am I thinking about that right?
Absolutely. So, we have this saying at Verde Group, and it says if you don't know how much your current service experience is costing you from a financial risk perspective, then how could you possibly know how much you need to invest to fix it? So, and often, I've spoke to one leading bank in Canada, and they said, a few years ago, the entire bank was obsessed with measuring irritants and friction, because some executive thought, that's important, which is great. I'm glad that happened. But then what happened is every part of the organization was measuring just irritants. And they ended up with a list of like 500 irritants that customers could experience. And they didn't know what to do with that information. They didn't know, okay, so now that we know what the irritants are, what do we do next? So here's the common treatment of that data is you take the biggest irritants, the ones that occur most frequently, or perhaps the ones that occur most frequently with the customers that you value the most, and you attack those. But that's a mistake, because frequency does not necessarily dictate impact. You could have a lot of noise in your system where there's a lot of, lots and lots of problems with a particular area, like maybe I don't understand the statement, and so I cannot tell you how many times banks have actually redesigned statements, digital statements, because one of the big complaints is I don't understand how to read my financial statement. And that's really not the issue. The issue is not I don't know how to read my statement. It could be something else that's underlying that. So really, I think that's where there's a fail point in the measurement is, do we really understand the discrete experiences that have disproportionate impact on that negative market impact, number one? And can we quantify that risk, right? How big that impact is, and then you've got an ROI model. And Verde Group, we know how to do that. We know how to separate and tease out the experiences that really matter from those that don't and may be occurring far more frequently.
Thank you for sharing. That makes a lot of sense. And I think it would be a reasonable logic to go after the frequency, the things that come up the most, because that's what's going to be reported on. That's what you're going to see. But to your point, which ones really have this differentiated impact on the customer experience? So what would be some of the steps that I might need as a leader to, or it might be useful in my toolbox as a leader to quantify the impact of these negative experiences?
So the first thing is, do we really know how to interrogate on negative experiences? So that's the first side. So we always say, if you're going to speak with a customer and then you want to measure what they're feeling, make sure that that instrument, whatever it is that you use, actually uses the language that your customers would use to express what they're experiencing with you. So speak customer, number one. And I see a lot of surveys out there that are like scary because they're very technical and customers like, I have no idea, what I'm answering, or even, so hire a professional is my advice in terms of knowing how to create a measurement instrument that really interrogates in a way that a customer might comprehend. And then, leave no stone unturned. Like, you really want to cover the full gamut, cradle to grave of that experience journey. From before a customer engages with you and buys from you, so the sort of pre-buy experiences, which could include marketing, etc., all the way through to using your product and service, and then all the peripherals that, peripheral business processes that your customers rely on in order to use your products, your customer support, billing, invoicing, all those things, right through to, they've used the product now and what are you doing? How are you engaging with that customer? So it's quite possible to come up with 300 or 400 unique experiences that customers may have. And then it's about, okay, obviously we can't ask customers about 300 things, but how do we nail that down? How do we narrow that experience set down to a discrete set of experiences that we want to test? And so there's a bit of science with that on how, bring that list down. And then lastly, and the way we do is we really apply a lot of data science to how we analyze what matters most to customers, which experiences really do have that disproportionate impact on market behavior. We don't have a black box. It's pretty straightforward statistics, but it is some modeling that we would do to basically determine the problems that matter most. And then if you know what the value is of a customer, whether it's lifetime value or transactional value, if you're a retailer, whatever, you can actually do the math and say, okay, how many customers have this problem? How many customers are going to not buy from us when they have this problem? What is the value of the customer? And before you know it, you have the simple equation for sizing up the cost of that problem. And now when you, stack those problems together, you can get a pretty identifiable list of priorities for the business.
So you mentioned data science, and in the class I'm teaching, as a matter of fact, as we're recording, I'm finishing up tomorrow night's the last class for this particular cohort at MSU, and it's customer relationship management. And you mentioned, pretty much the customer life cycle at one point from end to end, and making sure we don't miss anything in differentiated experiences. One of the things that came up in the class is this service recovery paradox.
Yes.
And I'll just explain it, but then I want to get your feedback. So there was a study done a while back that looked at things like customer loyalty levels and the impact when something goes wrong at a company. Mm-hmm. What happens? What's the risk? What's the impact? And when things go wrong, and as you mentioned, there's always something that goes wrong. No organization's perfect. So when that happens, what do companies do about it? And those, if you can recover from that failure and in a way that the customer feels good about, then at the end of that, the actual loyalty can actually rise above the yes. original trajectory. And so let me get your feelings as it relates to the conversation we're having. Struggling to connect the dots across your customer journeys? You're not alone. For many CX professionals, journey mapping is still manual and fragmented, especially in large organizations. Journey Track changes that. Their platform unifies journey mapping, management, and measurement in one place, giving you a real-time view of every touch point. Uncover friction, align teams, and prove the ROI of your CX initiatives so you can make smarter decisions and deliver smoother journeys. Want to see how AI can help you map smarter, not harder? Download our free white paper at journeytrack.io/podcast or click the link at the end of the show notes to get started with AI-powered journey mapping in minutes.
And Verde Group's been measuring that effect for 30 years. So without a doubt, service recovery is an incredibly important factor to mitigate risk that comes about from friction. So an organization has an absolute chance, they have a shot at bat to recover the damage from that problem with the recovery. But here's the problem with that. So number one, it assumes that when a customer has a problem, an egregious one, a high-risk problem, that they actually take the time to contact the organization, giving the organization the opportunity to recover, okay? And the actual fact is most people don't. So you have a lot of risk simply in the creation of friction. But when you do get that opportunity to recover because the customer had trust and trusted you as an organization enough to contact, however method they contacted, online, whatever the channel, to say, hey, I have a problem. Now, think about this. The reason why there is potential for greater loyalty after a customer contacts and you do an amazing job of recovery is all based on social science. It's called cognitive dissonance. So what this means is if the customer has the trust, the belief that calling you, contacting you to get resolution, if that belief was validated because you actually solved it, then they're entrenched. They're now, oh my God, I was right. I was right to contact. So now I love you more because I gave you a chance, because I had trust and you delivered for me. That's what's happening here. So here's the opposite of that. When the customer chooses and trusts you enough to contact you with their problem, and you don't make it worth their while because you make it really hard for them to contact you. First of all, they might not know who or where, or oh my God, or they get thrown around 3 or 4 times. And then by the time they get to someone, they don't have the ownership, the authority to solve your problem, and you're waiting. So if that experience is anything but amazing, you actually kill loyalty. For the same reason, cognitive dissonance. They trusted you, you violated that trust, and now you're basically saying, you were wrong, customer. You were wrong to contact me because I really screwed up on the recovery. Not only did I create the pain of the problem, but then I made it impossible for you to get resolution, so now they hate you more. So now you may have lost that customer forever. So the risk, and sometimes we see this, we tell companies, shut down your call centers, shut down your contact channels because you're doing such a horrible job of resolving that you're actually killing all those customers. They have no chance of ever coming back to you. And so that's the danger. And the other thing that I honestly have seen, and that is the effect that you've just described, Mark, where, oh my God, a customer has the trust, they contact, the organization does an amazing job of recovery, and look, we get a lift in loyalty. Those days are numbered, and they don't happen very often. The best that you can hope for today, and I can tell you why, is to put the customer in the same place that they would have been had they not had that problem in the first place. That is what we're seeing as best case scenario. We're rarely seeing companies deliver incremental value or loyalty or advocacy as a result of doing an amazing job of recovery. Those cases are far and few between. Customers just have heightened expectations. Organizations like Apple and Amazon have created an incredibly high bar for organizations to meet. And remember, I don't care if you're in aerospace or you make widgets or you are a B2B or B2C, every single human that you are selling to is buying from Amazon or Apple or some of these other stellar performers when it comes to experiences. So that's your competition. So anyone who says, we don't compete with Apple or Amazon, you all absolutely compete with Uber. You compete with all of those companies because your humans that you're interacting with, they're using those services, and that's your benchmark.
Yeah. And you're not suggesting that they give up on aspiring to deliver great experiences or recovering. You're just saying that few and far between are actually doing it.
We recommend that companies have an incredible, understanding of what I call the problem resolution machinery. So it is a very sophisticated and complex process. Resolving customer issues is like resolving world hunger. It's massive. And it's not a department's responsibility. It's an organization's responsibility. Companies that are really good at it have it in their DNA that no matter who touches anybody in the organization, it's everybody's job. So as soon as you see, this department is responsible for handling customer issues, then I can tell you without a doubt that that company is failing.
Let me ask you, what comes to mind is I don't know if you know who Lou Carbone is, but Lou is one of the founders. Some people argue he's the one who came up with the term customer experience management in one of his papers for Harvard Business Review, I don't know, 1994 or something like that. And Lou's been a guest on the show and is a faculty member at MSU as well. He wrote a book called Clued In, which was largely about the psychology behind the experience and how to design an experience based on how humans operate and how they think and what affects their psychology. And one of the criticisms he has for customer experience leaders is along these lines. And he says, we often fall into a break fix mentality. We're the repairman or woman, and that's a trap. So I want to talk about how what you're or help me and the audience distinguish between the break fix trap, as Lou calls it, and what we're talking about by understanding friction and differentiating points.
So much to unpack in that question. I don't even know where to start. First of all, when we look at behaviors that people and organizations exhibit, the problem resolvers, always fighting to resolve a customer issue. And I have a client like that who every single executive is just tuned for firefighting.
Mm-hmm.
A customer can call the CEO and that CEO is going to resolve that problem. So we often say the firefighters are also arsonists. So I think that the issue with that behavior, to comment on Lou, and I don't know, what he says about this, but often we have to look at the intrinsic reward system that is set up in an organization. Are leaders rewarding the heroic efforts that people take to resolve customer issues? And it doesn't have to be a direct reward. It could be an intrinsic one, sort of not explicit reward. They get, called out in meetings. They get the email that says, oh my God, that encourages that behavior. And it moves it. It keeps it at the hero level and prevents it from getting to the systemic level, which is what I'm suggesting organizations need to do, is they need to have a system of resolving customer issues. They need to address problem resolution at a systemic level. In addition to having a process for understanding where friction is occurring and a process for fixing the friction that matters most for the customers that matter most. And that's really important because I see a lot of organizations measuring customer experience and thinking that customers are this ginormous, homogeneous group of characters, and they're not. Customers are very heterogeneous. You've got customers with different life stages, product life cycles in your whatever you're trying to sell. Their aptitude for embracing digital channels versus in-person might be different. So recognizing that all your customers are really unique and having a process improvement plan that addresses customers at a segment level is really critical and very rarely done.
Love it. I love it. That was, I apologize for the complex question I asked, but you did a good job of unpacking it and explaining why we're not talking about traditional break fix and the traps that organizations can fall into. Look, I love what you said. And going back to the top, I want to kind of end on this point, which was the ROI of CX, the ROI of the experience, and the business case we're trying to make for executives, and looking at risk, looking at revenue at risk, and looking at the most impactful parts of the experience where we're causing friction, and just summarizing for the audience, and the negativity bias that we have as human beings makes the risk associated with bad experiences or parts of their journey with you high risk opportunity for churn, customer churn, and at the very least an erosion of loyalty. Right. And so, and you talked about looking at that, understanding what that costs you as an organization, so you can begin to make the business case. And what I love what you said was you're looking at CLV as one of the potential ways. And I think traditional business accounting metrics, what Fred Reichheld calls capitalistic accounting, gets us into a trap of not understanding the value of a customer, and customer lifetime value is just one. There are many ways that you
Yeah.
can do it. I don't know from your experience, but from my experience, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. My experience is there isn't necessarily a one size fits all in terms of the financial measurement you want to use. The best metric to use is what your financial group will agree to as one that's valid.
Love it. And Mark, that is bang on true. That is exactly what we would recommend. You are so right there.
And you can tie those. You can tie to those, can't you?
Yes. So you're absolutely right. Choose a financial metric as your dependent measure that has standability in the boardroom, that no one will question. Oh, how did you get that number? And what does that really mean? So you want a generally accepted of, quantifying finance for your business, quantifying the value of a customer. So that's critically important. Otherwise, you're going to get questioned, and then people are just going to not believe any of the insights that you might bring to the table.
What a terrific conversation. I could talk to you all day, Paula, but we've got to land the plane. I want to finish with one question, and then talk a little bit about how people can connect with you if they're interested and they'd like to learn more. So the question is, this should be easy for you. What delights you as a customer, you personally?
That's a great question, and it's an easy one to answer. I get delighted not by, surprises or anything out of the ordinary. I get delighted when what a company promises to do, they actually do it. So it's just the consistency of their value proposition. It's consistently executing on what you say you're going to do. That delights me. So it's like, if you say you're going to do this and you do it, yay, happy, I'm engaged, I'm an advocate. But if you say X and you deliver Y and you do that more than once, I'm not going to come back.
Well said. I don't think you're alone in that thinking. So the last part of it is, boy, you and your organization have been at this a long time. You've got a tremendous amount of expertise. You do great research. And if you just listen to our conversation and you want to know more and you want to be able to get a hold of Paula, what's the best way for people to reach you if they want to learn more?
Absolutely. So the best way, all the links and abilities to contact any of us at our team is through our website. So we are at verdegroup.com, and that's the best way. And we have a lot of case studies, a lot of material. People will find copies of our newsletter, which we publish every month. And there's a lot of great research in our monthly newsletters. We publish blogs every month. So we're constantly out there publishing, writing, researching, sharpening our tools. But our website is the best source. And there's a link in there or a little button you could push and someone will reach out if you want information. So I think that's the best way to reach me or anyone else in our firm.
Excellent. And as always, we'll have all that in the show notes. Paula, thank you so much for being a guest today.
Thank you for the great questions, Mark, and the incredible insight that you bring to the table as well on this topic. Definitely appreciate it.
Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Delighted Customers podcast. It would mean so much if you would take a moment to subscribe. You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts, click on the plus sign or follow button, and that will ensure that you don't miss an episode, and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you'd leave a 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday.